jungle explorer, television presenter, wildlife enthusiast, and patron of the wilderness for the United Nations Environment Programme. Welcome to the Be the Change in 2022 podcast, a series of conversations organised by One Carbon World in collaboration with the United Nations Climate Neutral Now initiative. One Carbon World is a climate positive, not-for-profit organisation and a global resource partner of the Climate Neutral Now initiative, launched by the United Nations Climate Change. They're registered in the UK and have operations in over 31 countries, offering advice and support on measuring, reducing and rebalancing the emissions of large and small organisations. They've already secured a commitment to reducing and retiring over 20 million tonnes of CO2 from the atmosphere. As everyone knows, COP27 is bringing parties together to accelerate action towards the goals of the Paris Agreement and the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. Egypt's COP27 presidency vision is to move from negotiations and planning to implementation. Aligned with this vision, One Carbon World aimed to promote immediate action and strengthen its joint agenda with the UN in the mitigation of the effects of climate change through swift, voluntary action. The main goal of this podcast is to present to you inspirational stories and innovative solutions, reach more individuals and organizations worldwide, and encourage them to commit to do everything in their power and to do it now. This first episode is called Africa, Leadership, Inspiration and Sustainability, an exciting topic and more than timely as COP27 is happening in Africa at the moment. The African continent can indeed lead the way in sustainable development, demonstrating the importance of promoting inclusion and inspiring sustainability through international cooperation and collaboration. As a wildlife enthusiast myself, I've worked and explored different African countries and seen how sustainable development is key to conservation and the protection of our environment. Now, before we invite our first guests, we'd like to share a message from Miguel Naranjo, Programme Officer of the United Nations Climate Neutral Now initiative team in Bonn. Over to you, Miguel.
Hello, my name is Miguel Naranjo, and I am Program Officer with the UNFCCC Secretariat based in Bonn, Germany. I'm very glad to send this message to the Be the Change event 2022. I want to thank One Carbon World for organizing it, for bringing together so many stakeholders to keep the attention on the need for action, the need for the response to climate change. As we head towards COP27 in Egypt, this session today is about Africa. So it's very relevant. It's very linked to our upcoming COP, where Africa is at the center of the attention. Needless to say, Africa is one of the most vulnerable regions of the world to climate change, both because of its natural characteristics, but also because of the lack of resources for an effective response to climate impacts in many cases. So supporting Africa, not only in reducing or avoiding a generation of greenhouse gas emissions, but also and in particular adapting to the impacts of climate change is crucial. Now, Africa has a lot of opportunities to develop sustainably, and I am assuming that you know more than me as experts discussing on Africa today, that Africa has enormous potential for the production of renewable energy, for example. It could supply easily its own needs for energy and also support others, most in particular Europe, for example, in the production of electricity. So at the same time that climate change poses a threat to the continent, it also represents an opportunity. It represents an opportunity to contribute actively to the response to climate change and generate benefits for society, economic and other social benefits for the communities of the continent, if done correctly at the same time. So hopefully we can see climate change as a motive, a reason to respond more quickly to the needs of Africa and to support the continent in becoming a part of the solution that it can be. I think I don't need to say that 2022 has raised the alarm with many of our fellow citizens around the world, given the severe impacts that we have seen all over the world. Unfortunately, the situation is not looking better for the future. So the response to climate change is more urgent every day. So again, I want to thank you, the participants in this session, those of you listening to it, and One Carbon World for organizing it. Hopefully together we can continue pushing for the implementation of solutions, and in this case, as it refers to Africa. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the session.
Thank you very much, Miguel, for that brilliant message. So without further ado, I'd like to invite our first guests who'll be speaking about the progress of their Kenya-wide initiative in collaboration with One Carbon World. Now, Maggie Hobbs is the founder and director of Tambuzi, a fantastic and ethically run 64-hectare farm in Kenya, and a specialist supplier of traditional garden-scented roses. We also have with us Martin de la Harpe, Head of Sustainability of Flamingo Horticulture, one of the world's leading growers and suppliers of fresh-cut flowers, house and garden plants, and premium produce. Welcome both. Now let's get started with our very first question, and I'm sure our listeners are fascinated to hear the answer of this. The United Nations team in Bonn now has a fantastic representation of Kenyan organizations in their Climate Neutral Now initiative. What is the Kenya-wide initiative, and can you tell us what made you encourage other organizations to follow your steps? Maybe Maggie, you could start this question.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ben. I'm very happy to be on the show with my friend and colleague, Martin. And the story really starts back in 2019 with a conversation with Martin before the world had changed so radically. The flower industry, the Kenyan flower industry, is really based on a culture of collaboration. It's about 30 years old, and people have been working together a great deal in that period. And I was speaking to Martin. He's in a much bigger company than mine. Mine is a small, relatively in the flower industry, a small business, saying I was frustrated. I didn't know how to start this journey that we knew we needed to start, because there's an enormous amount of debate in particularly Europe about fresh produce coming from Kenya and the associated carbon footprint that goes with it, and trying to work out how we join that debate constructively. We knew that we actually had to start our own measurement and know what we were doing. So Martin suggested we get in contact with One Carbon World and apply for a grant. The process was incredibly smooth and easy, and that led us to become, I would say, sort of climate neutral now evangelists. I think the team at One Carbon World would say that. So everyone we spoke to in that process, in the companies around us, particularly in the flower industry, we were able to say in really concrete terms that it was affordable, easy, that you had to start this process. And we now, I think in Kenya, have 25 companies perhaps signed up. I think it's around that, and then of which 10 are flower farms. So we saw this kind of network effect, people getting excited, people ready to take the first step in what can often seem a very complex procedure.
Martin, perhaps you can elaborate maybe on a slightly more macro scale, slightly larger company.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We've been in quite a lucky position in that since the company was founded in 1982, the owners themselves been involved with sustainability programs from the start. So we've had a very good basis for developing the sustainability activities within the organization. marching forward now through to where we are today. Obviously, carbon is very much high up on the agenda, and through our work and collaboration and looking for innovative approaches in the space and to learn more, we got in touch with One Carbon World and hope to share what we found within the industry. Our scope 3 is our partners' scope 1 and 2 emissions. So we've all got to work together.
Now, impressively, both Maggie and Martin, you've achieved gold recognition in measuring your emissions in the UN initiative. Tell us what kind of concrete steps you've taken to make a real difference with your businesses in Kenya. Martin, maybe we'll stick with you for the first answer.
Thanks, Ben. Yes, no. If we start with the UN slogan, the UN climate neutral slogan, measure, reduce, and contribute. If we start at the measurement phase, the first steps were around getting to grips with your footprinting and measuring things effectively. But we started to take that a little bit further now. The science around measurement of carbon in agriculture is very poorly understood. So now we're collaborating as an industry with the product environment footprints to enable the footprints to be measured consistently and enable emissions to be reduced industry-wide. If we then look at the result, so the reduction area, there's a multitude of programs which the businesses have been looking at, whether it be LED lighting, energy efficient irrigation pumps, switch it off campaigns. But I guess one of the programs that with more innovative that we've looked at is the reduction of our gas usage in our canteens. We currently provide 3,000 meals a day on our operations in Naivasha in Kenya, and we've switched from gas, LPG gas, to super logs, which are actually processed waste, fecal waste, and in that sense we're saving 2 tons per ton of super log, as well as 88 trees if we compared that to the use of charcoal. So those kind of innovative programs have really made a difference to our own operations.
Maggie, are you producing 3,000 meals a day?
No, we're their tiny little brother, I'm afraid. So we're little sister probably, because we're 50% women working on the farm. So we're about 450 people, which is, you know, in the flour industry is small. Obviously in other businesses that's quite a lot of people to have. I think what happened to us is the measurement just sort of liberated us into starting to think about what we could do. We already had 80% daytime solar. So we have our own solar system on the farm. So 80% of our daytime use in water pumps and refrigeration and things like that was being covered by a solar system. And then in the evening, we go back onto the grid. And one of the incredible things about Kenya is we're already 90% renewable on grid. So Kenya is a world leader in this, in terms of what's actually happening on the national grid. So that made our energy use, we were already in quite a good way, actually. I think One Carbon World were very excited by that part of our measurement. So then the next things that we started to think about were inorganic fertilizer. So fertilizer is a big issue. It's a big geopolitical issue, as we are all experiencing right now. And so both in terms of financial drivers, but also obviously in terms of our carbon footprint, we're looking to really increase our own fertilizer production, organic fertilizer production, and that leads then to soil. So soil as farmers is critical. Everywhere in the world, people start to talk to you about soil. And the opportunity of actually getting the carbon back into the soil is a really exciting thing that we're working on. We've actually made a company-wide KPI, a key performance indicator. Everybody will get a bonus if we increase the soil carbon content on the farm. So that's everybody, that's accountants, everyone. So it's a joint project to really understand how important the soil is for this journey. We've done things like transitioning from plastic sleeves around the flowers to paper sleeves. And I suppose the bit I would really like to talk about is, for me, central to all of this is people, right? So we have got to think about the way that our employees' lives, can reduce their already very small footprints. I mean, they've got, compared to a European footprint, it's marginal. Most people are walking to work. They don't have anything like the personal footprint that we see in European countries. So what we're looking at is saying, reduce what you have got. So we've got, for example, we've done gas stoves, which allow people to not use charcoal. We've done water tank projects so that people can harvest rainfall when it comes. The rain is becoming much less predictable, so people need to collect it when it comes. We have a very exciting e-bike project where we're using that excess daytime solar to have e-bikes, and basically trying to say, how can we help our employees, which are a constituency of 450 people, also reduce their impact within the business context.
Maggie and Martin, I find it really inspiring. And I think your examples have shown that all businesses can and must make a difference. Final question to you both, and maybe we'll start with you, Maggie, to answer this. What advice would you give if you're a small or a large business in Kenya or somewhere else in Africa? Where do they start?
So, I mean, I would say there is incredible power in owning your own numbers, especially, I think, if you're in an industry that's being challenged on this. So being able to say, yes, actually, we do know our own numbers. So the measurement is exciting. It really is, because otherwise you're in this sort of horses running in the dark mentality. So the measurement was amazing. Go for it. Get it done. It's easy. It's actually affordable. It's not difficult. And with partners like One Carbon World, we can take these steps very easily. The next thing I think I would say is collaborate. So look in your own industry, look at the people around you, look at your community, work out how you can collaborate to push this forward. This is not something we need to compete about. You know, businesses have a competitive element with each other. This is not a competition. This is a collaboration to move ourselves forward.
Martin, what kind of advice might you give a company, especially if there might be a slightly larger one who wants to start making changes?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'd echo what Maggie said. Is the key thing is to start measuring effectively and use the resources available in the space. There's tremendous support through the UN program, through One Carbon World, to support businesses of all size. I think that's the key message, and then start to expand it for larger businesses. They involve supply chains, and those involve partners, and get your partners involved as well, because that will enable the whole supply chain to contribute to reductions in carbon. The second thing I'd look at is try and around the collaborations, look for innovative solutions. There's so many different organizations out there now doing really good work, and work with those companies to support your activities, as it'll go a lot further.
Martin and Maggie, thank you both very much for your time. Keep up the good work. Thank you for your commitment and for sharing some of those ideas with us today. It's now time to listen to some inspirational organizations, but we will be back afterwards.
Africa is now leading the way in sustainable development. Many organizations are coming together to find better and greener solutions to the challenges we are facing today. These efforts are key for biodiversity conservation and the protection of our environment. Westphalia Fruit Group is pioneering involuntary climate action by setting carbon reduction targets and implementing nature-positive action. We have asked their team to tell us more about what concrete steps they are taking.
We will focus our agricultural operations to reduce nitrogen fertilizer and utilize the green waste as compost to build soil carbon storage and recalculate the bioassets of our farms.
We have measured our Scope 1 and 2 emissions and have created a targeted action plan to reduce over time, and will measure our Scope 3 emissions by the end of 2022.
IPS is another example of how working with suppliers can help achieve carbon reduction targets across value chains. Let's see what their team has to say.
The IPS agro-industry sector engages thousands of small-scale farmers.
We plan to introduce 15 practices to practice regenerative agriculture.
We have a solar system in place. We also implemented a biomass boiler.
We're investing in the first electric refrigerated vehicle in Kenya.
Tree planting also became quite important to us. We've also partnered with the community around us, as it helps us to be able to sequester the carbon that is generated from our activities.
Join the One Carbon World Africa-wide initiative. Demonstrate your achievements and commitment to sustainability. Be part of the solution.
Welcome back. Now, moving on to our second guest, I would like to welcome Ronald Higiro, General Manager of the Rwenzori Sustainable Trade Centre. At Rwenzori, a group of farmers and producers came together to work diligently to deliver for their families and local communities. Now, thanks to their support, women were able to organise in associations, take credits and engage in the local trade of surplus vegetables and staples as an additional income. Through the formation and capacity building of cooperatives, farmers are now exporting certified fair trade and organic coffee and cacao and fair trade certified cotton. Welcome, Ronald, and thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ben, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Now, the Rwenzori Sustainable Trade Centre was the first carbon neutral social enterprise in Uganda. Can you tell me a little bit about how you achieved this amazing result?
Yes, thank you, Ben. It gives us so much joy and optimism to be the very first carbon neutral social enterprise in Uganda. Over the years, we've helped over 6,000 families replace wood for fuel with briquettes made from coffee, cocoa, and cotton waste. We've helped these families gain the skill sets to make eco stoves for cooking, provided credit for households to acquire solar and eco technology at very affordable prices that were to some extent subsidized. And so all this has created employment to the youth in these communities. And I must inform you that these are 12 of the hardest to reach communities, somewhere close to the top of the Rwenzori Mountains. With One Carbon World's help, we became the very first carbon neutral enterprise in Uganda, ourselves learning about our own footprint and in the process, winning a very large grant to build and create an exemplary carbon neutral training and trade center for in the Rwenzori region of Western Uganda.
Ronald, thank you. That is so inspiring. I've been fortunate enough to visit the Rwenzori region and visit some of the communities there. Now, you've won a large grant to design and build this exemplary carbon neutral training and trade centre, which you just mentioned, for and in the Rwenzori region. Can you tell us a little bit more about why this is key to your sustainability plan?
Yes, first and foremost, we shall call this the forever home, and forever really is sustainability in itself. This will give us a permanent home in the region, confirming our mark and drive to sustainability. It gives us the opportunity to survive all the works, supervise, because majority of our members work independently, but with this home, we shall be able to supervise all their works, especially the women that weave baskets. The use of natural dyes is very key to us, so we shall be able to control the sustainable production of these dyes and the sourcing of sustainable produced raw materials for crafts. I think we didn't mention crafts in the introduction, but all the women that are not engaged fully in the cash crops, that's coffee, cocoa, cotton, and cocoa, are involved in baskets weaving, and we export large numbers of baskets to Europe through some of the clients that we've developed over time. So this home too gives us the opportunity to offer key training and capacity building sessions to our members and the rest of the community. We intend to use this trade center to economically demonstrate value addition through running an efficient cafe and a sustainable chocolate kitchen, where we produce commercial chocolate and also provide hands-on training in domestic chocolate production. This is a very rare skill in Uganda, and yet we produce a lot of cocoa. So we intend to promote sustainable production of domestic chocolate. This home will be the region's, I would actually say, the country's largest craft market. Our home will be well positioned along the main highway to the famous Queen Elizabeth National Park and the mountain Rwenzori, which you've actually visited. So the home will be strategically located right at the roadside.
I love this idea of a forever home. I think
so finally, with the forever home, we shall be able to systematically examine the positive and negative effects of business activities along the value chain. Early identification of future opportunities and risks shall make our business model more resilient and sharpen understanding of the long-term value that our activities create to the society that we serve.
Ronald, for over a decade now, you've been helping farms and farmers in Uganda to become more sustainable, achieving some really fantastic results, as you've just told us there. What would be your final message to other farmers or producers in Uganda, Africa, and other people all around the world? What advice would you give to them?
Yeah, my message to all farmers and producers in Uganda, Africa and beyond is to embrace sustainable production. This can be achieved through certification, and I think that's exactly what we have done. There are several certification bodies across the globe which promote sustainability. We have achieved fair trade certification, organic certification, and we are now on the road to bird-friendly certification. All these have a strong focus on sustainability. The climate situation today is aggravated by changing weather patterns and unstable socio-political dynamics, which have led to prolonged dry spells, to heavy uncontrolled rains, and have led to floods and mudslides, especially in our region. The climate situation is aggravated by changing weather patterns and the unstable socio-political dynamics, which have led to prolonged dry spells and heavy uncontrolled rains that have led to floods and mudslides, especially in our region. And this has heavily affected coffee production and pricing globally, actually. So to protect the value of Africa's farmlands, protected areas, and conservation zones, we must continue to interest ourselves in practices and technologies that deliver high yields, research into climate-smart crops, interest ourselves in tools and knowledge and know-how to transform our agricultural ventures sustainably. We have to integrate sustainability in our strategic management processes and pay very special attention to the sustainability analysis of our businesses, which include the footprint, handprint, and other market signals and requirements. This we have done very well as Rwenzori Sustainable Trade Center, and we believe that if most of the farmers and farming associations in Africa do this, we shall be able to achieve all our sustainability goals.
Ronald, thank you so much for your time joining us from Uganda. Your work there really is inspirational for us all. We need more organizations like Rwenzori working towards sustainable development, not just in Uganda, not just in Africa, but all over the world. So thank you again for your time. Congratulations on your incredible achievements. Now, before we move on to our next guest today, let's listen to some more inspirational organizations and their work towards climate voluntary action, and we'll be back in a minute.
The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are guiding voluntary climate action in Africa. Sustainable water management, protecting biodiversity, and ensuring decent work and economic growth are key to this revolution. This helps promote the well-being and progress of local communities and provides more equal opportunities for all. Flamingo Horticulture is implementing a bold plan to contribute to voluntary climate action and follow the United Nations roadmap. Let's find out more about their great initiatives.
We are constantly replanting indigenous trees on all our non-cropped areas, increasing our carbon green asset value. We recycle 30% of our annual requirement of water, allowing us to farm more sustainably. We invested in a state-of-the-art vacuum cooling system to provide a rapid and efficient cooling process for our flowers and produce. We have now shipped 15 million stems of flowers by sea, reducing our reliance on air freight and significantly lowering our overall carbon footprint.
Project Utopia is another example of how sustainable housing can make a real difference and contribute to achieving these UN goals.
Namibia in Southwest Africa is known as one of the most beautiful places in the world, with world-renowned sites such as Sandwich Bay Harbour, the Natcliffe Desert, and Arindi Private Game Reserve. And whilst desert taking back the land and buildings in Colemanskop seem beautiful, the stark, harsh reality is that this town, once known for being the richest place in the world per capita, is now a barren wasteland, with Namibia having negligible water reserves and 20% of its total population in extreme poverty. We're here to see why this problem exists and what we can do as a company to fix it. So, having seen the shantytown and really explored with Lumo what they live in, we've come to Rocky Crest, which is actually a mid-income settlement. What we're going to show and what we're going to explore now is exactly the type of standards that are being built and currently exist on mid-income, and why we feel that there needs to be a higher quality building solution provided to the local community. Project Utopia is all about creating community, and as a part of our program of creating such a groundbreaking performing building, we wanted to make sure we were training local people. What this enables them to do is when we are acting on resettlements, it actually allows them to be a part of the build program, and therefore they can learn the skills that can help them build the future of their homes and obviously the future of their resettlements. Teaching them all the base skills and all of the programs such as the 4-wall panel system, using local systems such as the roofing system, and then training them about the way the system works is key to fundamentally helping them understand the build design program.
Find out more about the United Nations roadmap. One Carbon World can help you start your journey. Be part of the solution.
We are racing towards the end of this episode. I hope that you are enjoying it as much as I have enjoyed chatting to our inspirational guests. Now, speaking of inspirational individuals, I'd now like to welcome Jonathan Sutton. Jonathan is the ESG Safety and Research Executive of Westphalia Fruit Group. Westphalia Fruit is a leading multinational supplier of fresh fruit and related products to international markets. Through their vertically integrated supply chain, they grow, source and ripen, pack, process and market quality avocados and other produce across the year and across the entire globe, including Southern Africa, Mexico, Chile, Colombia, Peru, and the US, among many other countries. Thank you very much, Jonathan, for your time. Now, the world is looking for answers to reverse soil erosion. We're hearing quite a lot about this, and restore waterways. Now, your company's founder, Dr. Hans Merensky, pioneered these actions in the early 1920s in South Africa. Can you tell us a little bit more about this vision and mission and why these actions are important for us and, even more importantly, for our future generations?
Our founder, Dr. Hans Merensky, became the owner of the Westphalia Fruit Estate, as we know it today, in the northern province of Limpopo in South Africa, almost 100 years ago. He was a visionary with regard to agriculture, and specifically the soil and the water on the farm. He studied the natural vegetation, removed all of the invasive species, which allowed the water to flow freely. He was also mindful of reserving this water for the winter season and the dry times. So he built dams and reservoirs to hold the reserves of water for these dry seasons. But he made sure that these were not contaminated by silt and topsoil running off the steep slopes. He defined that the trees should be planting according to a certain method, which minimized the soil runoff and slowed down any floodwater during the heavy rains. We also include ground cover today to bind the soil and increase the water holding capacity through improved soil structure and building those green manures and those green holding capacities. He was an incredible visionary of his time, and we still plant new orchards according to these principles and have adopted this thinking as we've established new orchards on steep slopes in countries like Colombia and Chile. So these actions will leave the topsoil in place for future plantings, and generations will take the benefit of the undisturbed soils in the future.
What a visionary. I find it amazing that 100 years ago, he could foresee some of the problems that we are facing today. And speaking of facing problems, Jonathan, water conservation is now a key part of the Sustainable Development Goals set by the UN. Here in the United Kingdom, we've had a long drought this summer, as many other nations around the world have had. Can you tell us more about Westphalia's groundbreaking work to ensure sustainable water use?
Westphalia looks at our water use and challenges the volumes needed to produce a sustainable yield. Developing and using the latest technology supports this. Westphalia has developed a system called low-flow drip irrigation, which delivers the water to a targeted area around the root ball of the trees, minimizing any waste and keeping the soil moist and the trees thriving in these environments. This technology, in conjunction with a high use of mulch and green manures, reduces the evaporation in the tropical climates of our farms. We keep wastewater to an absolute minimum too. We recycle as much as we can and treat water runoff so it can be returned to dams and be reused in the irrigation plans for future crops. Every drop we use is now measured, so we have an accurate data set and can be confident that we can achieve our 50% reduction by 2030. We see Westphalia as an industry leader and will continue to lead from the front on sustainable fruit production.
I love the ambition in that, Jonathan. A 50% reduction in the use of water is ambitious, but we need more of that. Now, we've talked about water, we've talked about soil erosion. Can we just come back to soil for a second? As you know, one of the main focuses this year is on soil health as a way to mitigate the effects of climate change. Tell us a little bit more about how and why you are a world leader in building organic carbon in soils in Africa and in other countries.
As we established our carbon reduction targets, we recognised the green asset value we hold in our orchards. This is not limited to the trees themselves, but how we can improve our soil carbon and return all the green mass back to the orchards in form of mulches and composts. So the only carbon we remove is the avocado fruit itself. Our aim is also to reduce synthetic fertilizers over time and replace them with green manures, which supply the nutrients for our trees and also lock more carbon back in the soils. We monitor the health of the trees and the soils on an annual basis and have a soil carbon indicator so that we can measure improvements over time. We appreciate it takes years to build soil carbon, but as we establish orchards with long life expectancy, in some cases they can be in the ground over 50 years, we don't disturb the soil. Once the trees are planted, as mentioned previously, we also establish green cover crops between rows and maintain these to avoid the competition, reduce soil erosion, and act as a green manure to return the carbon back into the soil. These also support the pollination services that thrive and produce the fantastic crops we enjoy throughout the year.
Jonathan, thank you so much for sharing such a fantastic example of climate action. Westphalia is truly an example of strong commitment and swift voluntary action. And I hope this serves to show others concrete steps that can be taken to make our businesses more efficient and sustainable, taking care of our natural resources and our biodiversity as well. Very sadly, we have reached the end of this very first episode of this Be the Change in 2022 podcast. I'd like to thank every single one of you for listening and following this great conversation. We've just learned of fantastic examples of really diverse organisations all across Africa that are going above and beyond to do something for our planet, our communities and our people. As we said at the beginning, this shows how Africa as a continent is leading the way in sustainable development. And it's inspiring to see so many people coming together with strong commitment, drive and determination to find better and greener solutions to the challenges we're facing today. Please remember that you can follow these conversations on Spotify, but also on YouTube and on the One Carbon World website too. Now, in our next episode, we'll be talking about how sport is pushing the boundaries in sustainability for the next generations. A fantastic topic indeed. We hope to see you there. Thanks and see you next time.